And we're live. Welcome to the Lovecraftian podcast. I'm Mike Davis with Lovecraftian. Let's do short introductions and then talk to John Langan. John is our guest today. Hey, John, how's it going?
Hey, everybody.
Good to have you here, man.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Rick, why don't we start with you and head over?
Rick Lay, writer.
Okay, Alex.
Alex Murray, comedian and voice actor.
All right, Matt.
Hi, I'm Matt Carpenter. I'm currently running movie night.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you doing that. For those who don't know, I started hosting a Lovecraftian movie night, and I've got a lot going on. It kind of got away from me, and Matt stepped in. Really appreciate that. We're using Rabbit, RABB.IT, to watch the movies. If you're interested, would you like people to email you to get details, Matt, or what would you like?
Well, every Saturday I post the link starting about 8:30 p.m. CST on the Easy message board.
Yeah, so if you're not on that board, ask to join. Just go to Facebook and type in Lovecraft Easy message board, and I'll approve you a day or two later. So you do that on Saturdays, Matt, and then
the usual time is 9 p.m. Central Time on Saturday. We have viewers from Japan, believe it or not, and we always conduct a poll to see which movie people want to watch. And strangely, it's never Big Ass Spider.
That is odd, yeah. And I hope that trend continues. Kirk.
Hi, my name's Kirk Battle, author, lawyer, amateur, all sorts of stuff. Thanks for having me.
Jesus, you're a lawyer? You're not kidding, bro.
Oh no, should I not have said that?
No, I'm kidding. My wife's was a ADA, so for a long time.
You know, it's surprisingly good training for cosmic horror. You get a lot of exposure to the void.
Yeah.
Well, we almost had one Lovecraftian writer nominated to a federal judgeship.
That is true. Ben.
Ben Handelman, Lovecraftian tech support.
He really is. Thanks for everything, Ben. Appreciate it. Okay, John Langan. Hey, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me, guys.
So, I could spout out a couple of lines introducing you, but how do you usually introduce yourself? What would you want to say?
I usually say I'm John Langan. I'm a writer living in the Mid-Hudson Valley of New York State with my wife and son and many, many animals. I have a new collection of stories out called Saphira and Other Betrayals from Hippocampus Press. It just came out on 4/20, which I didn't realize. Before that, I'd written a novel called The Fisherman, and another novel called House of Windows, and a couple of other short story collections. I review horror and dark fantasy for Locust magazine. Before that, I used to write occasional reviews for the LA Review of Books and the New York Review of Science Fiction. And for the past year, I've been a high school teacher. Before that, I used to teach. I used to be an adjunct instructor at SUNY New Paltz. But now I'm teaching high school English.
That's interesting. Didn't you used to teach at a military academy?
That's where I teach now. Yeah, I teach at the New York Military Academy. Yeah, that's a high school down next to West Point, or just about next to West Point.
Oh, okay. My wife does not teach at a military academy, but she's an English teacher now, so has been for the past 5 years or so.
Well, listen, if you ever need to threaten your kid with, I'll send you to military school, I'm your guy. I've got you
and
covered.
We know someone.
We know someone. In New York.
You're also a black belt in Korean martial art. Is that right?
Yeah, called Tang Soo Do. It's a kind of a blend of Taekwondo and Shotokan karate. And I started doing it with my younger son. I had done karate in my 30s for a couple of years. Liked it, but didn't like the culture of the school I was at, so I stopped going. We moved house. We bought our first house, and in that disruption, it became easy to leave that behind, and in a way, a good thing. But I always kind of missed doing martial arts, and then my younger son started doing karate, started doing Tang Soo Do, and I went. I would take him there, and I was really like, oh man, I'd love to do this, but I didn't want to be one of those dads who's like, okay, son, let me show you how it's done.
Yeah.
So I held off, and my son's
until
head
you got to the
instructor-
point where he says, "Look, Dad, let me show you how it's done."
This is the thing, right? Was I got to the point where the head instructor was like, "Oh, you seem like you really want to join," and I said, "Yeah, but I don't want to. It's for my kid. It's not for me, And he said, "Well, look, we'll wait till your son has his first belt promotion, and then you can join, and he'll be a higher rank than you." And I said, "Oh, that sounds great." And then, like a month later, my son got his next promotion, and I was like, "Wait, what? I don't think he's really
so
ready."
good.
Right. I was like, maybe you should give him another 6 months, But so yeah.
How old was he when he could kick your butt? Then?
They could still kick my butt, man. He there was a time that he and I'm trying to think about how old he was. He was maybe like 10 or 11, and we were in the living room, and I was like, all right, let's throw down, And so we took our positions, and he kicked me in the balls. And I just romped, and I'm lying there. But for a minute, he was really afraid, right? That but I just started cracking up because it was just so funny, that I'm like, let's throw down and bang,
Oh
so
my God! I've broken
like,
the old man.
Right, I'm on the ground, like curled in a fetal position, laughing, and my son's laughing, and my wife walks in and looks at the two of us and just shakes her head and keeps going.
That's pretty funny. How old's your son now?
He is going to be 16 in 3 weeks.
Oh wow, flies by, doesn't it?
Taller than I am, and plays. His big thing now is playing the guitar. He attends a school of rock, basically locally. So he just finished a show last night with his school, and he's also in a punk band. And so yeah, your life keeps changing, and I never thought I would be doing karate in my 40s, which, getting my black belt. And now it's like I'm listening to all these songs that I missed out on when I was younger, because I was not, surprise, I was not a big punk rocker when I was a kid. I was like, hey, Toto, they've got a new single. And, my son is like, let's listen to this Buzzcock song. And I'm like, okay. So, yeah, you keep evolving, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
So, John, I did the opposite. I got my son doing jujitsu because I wanted to do jujitsu, and it was a good way for me to justify. Like, look, he's only 4. If I have him start, I need to be able to do it. And
yeah, exactly.
Several years later, my wife did the same thing with guitar, where she wanted to play guitar, so she made him start learning it too. So now he's doing bass guitar, but he's basically just our excuse to do our own hobbies.
Right.
He's y'all's rhythm section. Like, you're just making him. He's your rhythm section and your muscle. I love it. Your 4-year-old.
Well, he's 11 now. We've been doing this for years now. So this is like going on 7 years of like, hey, what's really great? You have to start watching this. You have to start doing this.
Right. He can work the door at his own shows.
It's fantastic. It's perfect.
I feel you on my musical this is something I've been thinking about lately, how my musical taste has started changing. One of the weird things is bands whose early work I didn't like, I get really into now, like Arcade Fire. I wasn't a big fan of their early albums, but I love their new stuff. And then the bands I was obsessed with when I'm young, the stuff they're producing now, like like Modest Mouse, I guess. Like, I don't really know what they're doing anymore. They've gone in a different direction creatively. It's just strange how you kind of find yourself, artists have tuned into the direction you're into, and then sometimes they tune out. Right.
You kind of intersect one another. Yeah, when I was raised as a very devout Catholic in the 80s, 70s into the 80s, And so all those bands like AC/DC and Black Sabbath and Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, you know, they Ozzy Osbourne, right? You know, it was all part of the whole sort of satanic panic, that whole culture.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I was like really, yeah, exactly. I was really like afraid to listen to those things. You know, oh my God, what's going to happen to me? You know, whereas Men at Work seemed comparatively safe. Little did I know. And and now, of course, there's a kind of a funny horror story, isn't there? You know, that was where the real danger lay, the peril from down under. You know,
which subliminal message is worse?
Eat Vegemite sandwiches, and now, of course, my son is a huge AC/DC and Black Sabbath fan. So a lot of what I listen to now when we're in the car and we're going someplace, he's like, hey, let me put this on or let me put that on. And so, yeah, I'm now singing along to all these songs that I never learned the first time around. So this is time, however many times around this is. So
I didn't know that about you growing up as a devout Catholic. Did you go to a public school or a Catholic school?
No, I did 12 years of Catholic school.
Oh.
Every now and again, I meet someone who said,
Ouch.
I did 13 preschool. And I'm like, you win the record.
See, John, again, you're like the reverse person to me. I grew up basically with nothing, and then I became a devout Catholic as an adult. It's like, this is weird. It's like I'm looking in a mirror now.
I passed it on to you. I wondered where that wound up. I recorded that videotape and sent it out there, and I was like, I wonder who's going to get this thing.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the satanic panic thing because I was just refreshing myself on that earlier this week. When I was growing up, Catholicism was one of the things that was supposed to be secretly satanic. That it was like the Pope is technically the Antichrist, and all this just. I
was told that too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very, very, especially American Protestantism. It's really kind of fascinating to me. And there've been actually a few really, really good novels within the past few years dealing with that satanic panic period. Dan Shawn's novel, Ill Will, it's set in two different timelines, and one of the timelines is that satanic panic timeline, and so is Gillian Flynn's novel Dark Places, and same construction. Actually, I kind of wonder if Dan Shawn read her novel or had her novel in mind. But in her novel, there's a character whose brother was accused of a horrible crime, but it seems to be tied in to the general cultural milieu at the time. Everybody was like, "Oh my God, this kid's listening to heavy metal music. He must be a murdering psychopath," and it turns out the truth was a bit more complicated.
What was the title of that first book you mentioned?
Ill Will by Dan Shawn. It came out a couple of years ago, and I just, man, it's hard for me to think about a recent novel that had the same kind of overwhelming impact on me. I mean, I read a lot of great stuff, and there's a lot of great stuff out there, but this book connected with me the way that like Stroud's Ghost Story did, where, the first time I read Stroud's Ghost Story, I thought, that was great. I didn't understand half of it, but like it didn't make me angry the way, like sometimes that happens. You watch something or you read something, you don't understand it, and you're like, I'm just angry now. But with Stroud, when I finished Ghost Story, like the fact that there was stuff I didn't know about it was kind of exciting because it meant that I could go back and reread it. And that was the way I felt about Dan Shawn's novel. There's so much going on with the novel, and he does so many crazy things that I got to the end and I thought, man, I'm sure I have missed so much of this novel, but that's okay. That's actually really cool because that means I'm going to get to go back to it.
Yeah. That reminds me of a Simpsons clip where Homer's sitting in the dark in his living room watching Twin Peaks. Yeah. And he's watching it and something weird's going on the screen, and he's like, Homer's like, brilliant. I have absolutely no idea what's going on.
Yeah. But I love David Lynch, and it's for that very reason. It's that sense of mysteriousness, like I think that when people talk about, I guess Aikman, when people talk about Robert Aikman, that's one of the things, or a similar kind of thing they're cueing in on, is that feeling that something's going on and I don't know what it is, but that's okay. That's kind of cool. And with Lynch, I always just feel kind of uneasy. I'm always like, well, I don't know what's going on, but it's probably really, really bad. And there's a guy with a rabbit's head over there, and that thing.
That's probably not good. No. Yeah.
Just to keep with the sort of post-Easter theme of the show, you know.
So this earlier questioning about your martial arts skills, it to me
Or
begs
lack thereof, yeah.
yes. Well, it begs the question, because you're friends with these guys. If John Langan and Laird Barron and Paul Tremblay got into a fight, who would win, do you think?
You know, I've thought about that same thing many times because it just seems inevitable. It just seems inevitable that it's going to come to that at some point, you know, because they're like my best friends and I love them like brothers. And what is going to, it means we're gonna have like a Beatles level falling out, right?
Brothers,
and it's probably
brothers
going to
have to fight once in a while, you know.
Well, it's gonna come to blows, and you know that's gonna happen. It's probably gonna be at a convention. You know, there'll be lots. It'll be all over social media, and so I've thought about that. How do I handicap myself? And I don't like my chances. I gotta say, you know, Laird. For years, Laird studied a system of martial arts based in combatives, which is the World War II, maybe I think was when it was really developed. But it was the idea was to come up with a system of martial arts that used all the things that the other martial arts said, no, you can't do that. That's mean. And so it's
so
really
basically fighting to win with martial arts.
Yeah, exactly.
I can actually answer this question because I trained Gracie with the Gracies, and one of the Gracies is actually worked with the Army to come up with combatives in the 90s because they saw the first UFC and they wanted to know, and then they took what he told them and then they grabbed that stuff from the other martial arts. Before that, they had, when I was in the Marine Corps, I joined just after they had what was called line combat, where that was the idea, is fight dirty and all that stuff. And then they came up with the Marine Corps martial arts program, which is a similar idea. But yeah, it's this idea of, hey, we're not worried about like tournament fighting. We need to know like what's the fastest way you can disable someone and back off from them so you can shoot them.
Kick him in the nuts after they say, let's throw down.
In fact, what's hilarious is they teach you not to try to kick someone in the nuts because it's actually kind of hard to hit someone there on purpose. And it's easy to block. So instead, you kick them in the kneecap, so they scream in pain and fall on the ground, and then you shoot them in the head. Like this is.
Well, you know, you can also give, if you got access to their ear, if you give it a really hard jerk, there's nothing connecting that thing to the head really, except a little cartilage maybe. You can rip somebody's ear right off, and I'll tell you what, it upsets them. So.
Lovecraft easy and improving your life.
People are tuning in and going, when the hell are they going to talk about books?
All right, so let's get back to Barron though. So Barron's got that going for him, right? And he's
right.
Incredibly strong. He used to weightlift when he was younger, and I don't know how much he could deadlift, but he's still got a lot of that strength. When he'll come over every now and again if I need help lifting something, basically so that he can lift it. And I just sort of like take one end and I'm like, this is so heavy. He is fiendishly strong. On the other hand, Tremblay is full of rage. I mean, he's just absolutely there is
you heard it here first, folks.
There's no angrier man than Paul Tremblay. I mean, there's a reason he's into punk music. He's still like, he's upset about everything. I have personally seen him flip a chair at a ReaderCon when he lost a game of Mafia that we were all playing, and that chair went end over end. Everybody was afraid. So then you think, okay, so Barron's got it for the technique, but Tremblay's he's a rage monster, man, and he's got those long, spindly arms. So
he's the Hulk, basically.
I think it's got to come down to one of them. You know, it's one. I think I get knocked out almost immediately. But I survive for that reason, and I think they probably destroy each other in a cataclysmic duel.
And Laird used to weight lifts up in Alaska, and he had to walk a mile through the snow backwards to do it. So
right, carrying a bear just because every Alaskan gets a bear. That's one of the things.
Or wearing the bear, you know, same
in a
thing.
state constitution, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so pretending this is a serious podcast for a minute. All right, you know, I was actually going to ask you about your childhood. So, pretty serious Catholicism going on there. You know, which I guess begs the question in my mind of what happened after you graduated from school, and then did you go to college right away? Did it feel like you were like, oh, this is what the real world is like, or what happened exactly?
Well, yeah, okay, so what was great, I guess, about the Catholicism was it was post-Vatican II, so it hadn't tightened up too much in terms of becoming a lot more conservative, and it is. I think whether conservative or liberal, the religion is a storehouse of stories about the various saints and what have you, and so and then just other weird kind of mystical or supernatural events that would happen to people. My father told me a story once that, and I've told this story on other occasions, that he had when he was living in my parents are from Scotland. They're Scottish Catholics, so they're a minority population in a majority Protestant country, and for those guys at the time they were growing up, religion functioned in something of the same way that I think race functioned in the United States, that it was this all-consuming divider of identity. So my father told me a story about a group of disreputable people, therefore Protestants, who had decided to sneak into a Catholic church and steal a consecrated host, the little wafer. What they were going to do with it, nobody knew, but it wasn't going to be anything good. So they stole the consecrated host. They brought it to their apartment, and they put it on a little saucer while they went into the kitchen or something to figure out their evil plans. And as they were in the kitchen, the host started to bleed, and blood just started to pool up in the dish and drip off the sides of the dish. Well, of course, this made these heathens reconsider the error of their ways, and they immediately returned the host to the church. But the coda to the story was that my father had known a priest who had been on the altar when that host was used in a mass or something like that, and he said you could still see a little brown spot at the edge of it, where like a little scab, where it had bled.
And you're like, I know, I want to be right.
Exactly. So there was definitely this sense that the world is this kind of like it's not just that it's not just stories in the Bible or even stories in the lives of the saints from 100 or 500 years ago. This is like stuff that's happening like all over the place.
Yeah. Mm.
It's funny you mentioned the way it acts as race as well, because like in America, I mean that was also the case here back in like the 1920s. Catholicism was one of the main targets of the Ku Klux Klan. Because
that is true, yeah. Because
it was the other. It was all these filthy immigrants, from Italy and Poland or whatever they were coming from. Ireland had already sort of integrated at that point. But this idea of, that's not, I mean, like I said, when even today, I remember growing up that I was told Catholics weren't Christians, that, they pray to Mary, not God. Like all this, there's like a whole Christian community Protestant community that's still very anti-Catholic.
Catholicism also puts a lot of power in like people's hands, and Protestantism doesn't do that. Like you've got, priests are like wizardy in Catholicism, right? They're like transubstantiation is like happening, right?
Well,
and like as somebody who was raised,
class then?
What, Matt? Sorry.
The deacons are the tank class then?
For sure.
Okay.
Deacons tank hard. Yeah.
But I would say even though Protestantism says it doesn't have that, it sort of does. I mean, if you go to one of these evangelical mega churches, those
sure.
pastors can do no wrong, and you have to listen to they have church discipline. They have all these things that they
and they're laying hands on people and stuff, and curing wounds, no doubt.
Demons, handling snakes, that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and I live in Los Angeles, and John MacArthur in Santa Clarita is still one of these big, like he has this huge radio show and all this stuff. The Pentecostal movement started in Pasadena, and so it's a lot of that stuff is still there. It's just no one's getting necessarily murdered over it anymore, thankfully.
Sure.
Well, I didn't really want to. I guess I more wanted to ask John. The reason why I asked you that question is, growing up, did you have this sense of seclusion? I mean, if you're going to Catholic church and you're going to Catholic school, then you're kind of not in the real world until you graduate, I suppose. Is that the way you felt, or no?
No, actually, surprisingly, my parents were also great believers in education. So we read an insane amount. And, you know, there were things that I read probably before I was ready, you know, so I read a lot of comic books when I was a kid. Until I went to high school, I really wanted to be a comic book artist. And I used to draw just incessantly. And I was mostly reading Marvel at that point. And that was the kind of the great, like, second wave of Marvel. You know, you had that first wave in the 60s with Stan Lee and maybe early Roy Thomas, but you know, and I suppose Jack Kirby in a lot of ways right behind the scenes. But then in the 70s, you had Len Wein and Marv Wolfman, and then Roy Thomas writing Conan. You had this kind of new wave, and Doug Mensch as well. And so those comics, the Amazing Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four, when Wolfman was writing them, those were, and Conan when Roy Thomas was writing that, the first run on Conan where he was really trying to map out the chronology. It was not, but they were all adaptations, I guess, of Howard and also of Lynn Carter and L. Sprague de Camp's posthumous collaborations, and they led me into reading Conan. Led me into reading those editions of Conan. And maybe fortunately for me, my parents had no idea what was in them. So you know, and you know, I may have gotten through 5th grade math class by sneaking Conan the Barbarian, you know, behind my math book. And it's funny because I can vividly remember reading Rogues in the House, and what an intense story that was. While who would it have been? Sister Ann Daniel was trying to lecture me on something in math, and she was a sweet lady, so no harm to her. But so yeah, though I had a definite sense of things outside of that Catholic context, I suppose. And it wasn't really though till I hit probably freshman year in high school that I read Stephen King. That was what cracked things open and made me think, oh, I've got to be a writer now. And the Catholic high school that I went to had no art program. So I had been, when I was in grade school, I had this wonderful art teacher, Mrs. Miglis. I try to find her every now and again on the internet, and I don't know what happened to her. But she was this wonderful art teacher for this little Catholic school. And she encouraged me. Anything I wanted to do art-wise, she would support and put up on the wall and all this kind of stuff. So when I got to high school, though, they were like, art, well, we've got mechanical drawing, and that was kind of that. So almost simultaneously, I read King's novel Christine, and that, which is funny. It's probably among the more fantastical of King's novels because it's got the haunted car, and there's the big battle at the end between the hero and the girl in the it's like a sanitation truck, I think, or something, and Christine. So the sort of underlying narrative dynamics are very much those of fantasy. They're very much, you know, fighting the dragon or fighting the monster or something like that.
Right.
So yeah, it's when I got to I think even by the time I was a senior in high school, I was already really aware of a wider world.
That's good. You know, if they want to keep your mind bound up, a good way to do it is to keep you away from books.
Yeah.
Because you can live 1,000 lives through books. It's, you know. Rick, I know you had a question for John.
Yeah, continuing on this thread, but I also want to tie in John's fiction.
Sure.
Since he wrote a story at home in the house of the devil, I was curious of how you would, and I'll explain why, of how you were taught the devil in Catholic school. Because when I was raised there, because I went through 12 years of Catholic school. I was born in 1955, so I'm older than you. So I went, when I was pre-Vatican Council, we got hell and brimstone.
Yeah.
The devil exists and he's tempting you and he's got horns and everything. Then Vatican comes along and the devil vanishes. You don't hear about him at all. And when I was in high school, they was kind of saying, he exists as maybe a custodian of hell, but he's not really involved in the world. Until a best-selling book comes out called The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty, which makes Jesuits look cool.
Right.
And all of a sudden, we get all these references to The Exorcist in English class. So I'm just curious, how were you trained the devil in Catholic school?
Well, you're right that when I was growing up, when I was, it's funny, I can remember my parents telling me we went to. I was very young. We went to a restaurant. I was the oldest of four, and we're all in this restaurant. And my mother and father were like, "Oh, this reminds us of that restaurant in Rosemary's Baby." And we were like, "Rosemary's Baby, what's that?" And they told us a little bit about it. And we were like, I especially was like, "Oh, I want to see that." And they were like, "Absolutely not." They were really afraid, and they were really afraid of I don't know, sort of representations of the devil. For them, the devil was very real. There was no doubt about it. And yeah, when by the time I got a little bit older, The Exorcist was the thing. And not only that, but all those knockoffs of The Exorcist, Devil Dog, The Hound of Hell, and The Car, and all these things. And there was some kind of exorcism movie with a very young Kevin Bacon in it. And all of those things made the devil, brought him back, gave him a real kind of presence. And exactly. And my parents were, they were probably a little nervous about the Marvel Comics characters like the Son of Satan. That made them a little bit nervous. They weren't. The Lord of the Rings, where that stuff didn't bother them, especially once they found out that Tolkien was a Catholic, or C.S. Lewis. Well, he was an Anglican, so close. Close but no cigar.
Like Diet Catholic, half
exactly right. It's like, no, it's Diet Coke. So yeah, the devil was very much an exorcism. Exorcism probably did a lot during that time of the 70s into the 80s. I think that, and also I think all those bands that I mentioned before that now seem just so ridiculous or so theatrical, Alice Cooper or something like that, who just, you look at him now and you think, oh my God, well, that's just sort of Grand Guignol theater. But at the time, that was like the Antichrist stalking around up there. And yeah, the devil was definitely a real figure
it reminds me
in my childhood.
It reminds me a lot of there's this like Bram Stoker story before he got famous called The Judge. And
Yeah.
I remember I thought it was like comical at the time because literally it's this guy moves into a house that this evil judge used to live in. And slowly rats start coming out of the walls and all this stuff. But basically just Satan walks into the room and kills him. I don't think this is it's not really a spoiler. It's a short story. I hope I didn't ruin it for anyone.
No!
Damn it.
Yeah. But it's like one of those things where I was like, this is such a different era of
The butler.
Yeah. There's like no mystery or anything. The house is clearly evil. It's just this guy who's like, oh, there's no such thing as ghosts. And then Satan walks into the room and kills him. And you're like, what was the moral here? But sorry to circle that around to your point. It's weird when you have to like cross over into that making the devil real transition, because it's like you have someone like singing rock lyrics and you don't take it seriously. But then you have something like The Exorcist, where that movie's still horrifying to this day, like 2019. And it's just interesting, that dichotomy of what makes like the embodiment of evil like plausible or not.
Well, and if you look at The Exorcist, for example, it was written as religious propaganda. William Peter Blatty was very public that he wrote it to help convert people back to Catholicism. And
Really? I didn't know that.
yeah, he was a very devout, fairly conservative Catholic.
Oh, wow.
My English teacher was using it that way, certainly.
Yeah, and right before he passed away, I mean, one of the last public things he did is he wrote this really angry letter to University of Notre Dame saying like, oh, well, you guys aren't teaching enough like Catholic dogma, and you have teachers here that aren't even Catholics, and you're a Catholic university. How dare you? That's how conservative he was.
Well, the funny thing about Blatty, not to speak ill of the dead, recently Penguin Books reissued, like within the last couple of years, Penguin Books reissued Ray Russell's novel, The Case Against Satan, which is an exorcism narrative from about 10 years or thereabouts before Blatty's. I think maybe based on the similar, on the same source material that Blatty used, although I'm not 100% sure about that. It's probably about half the length of The Exorcist, and it's a terrific book, and it's much more ambiguous, I suppose. I mean, maybe it isn't when you get to the very end, but let's just say that there were questions about whether Blatty helped himself to what was in that book. So it'd be ironic, one of those sort of sad ironies of history, if the guy who was whose artistic practice was maybe a little bit questionable in this case should be thumping the Bible a little too heavily. That was a convoluted point. I'm sorry about that.
No,
That's fine.
it's fun. It's strange to me because, so we mentioned like how the Catholic Church shoots the devil, and like my local parish, they talk about it maybe once a year, other than when you recite the creed, like it's almost never brought up. But then you look at exorcisms, for example, like the church has an exorcist in every diocese, like a real trained, like still performs exorcisms in every diocese. It's not like The Exorcist where, oh, maybe the church does one of these every decade. It's all over the place. Right, there's a guy, a priest in San Francisco. I believe his name is Gary Frank. They made a movie based on him that starred. It was called The Rite. It had, I think, Dennis Hopper.
Oh, Anthony Hopkins. It was in that, I think. Yeah.
And I mean, this is a guy that like he's a priest. He has a parish in San Francisco, and he performs exorcisms 5 days a week. Like it's current to portions of the church. It's an interesting dichotomy.
Well, I want to get back to John, but I'll just say this. Not being a Catholic, you watch movies and stuff like this, and you get the feeling from the fictional movie world, if you don't know any better, which I don't, is that, priests, they hardly ever do exorcisms anymore. You're going to have a hard time finding a priest to do an exorcism. And I see that over and over in movies. So,
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's why I bring that up, because the movies say that, but I can tell you right now, if you called your local bishop, they have one. They may require you to get a letter from a therapist first, but they have one.
Yeah,
Is it more of a like
donation, right? Like, do you pay them?
the real question is, do they deliver, or do you have to pick it up yourself?
We don't hear the rest of Rick's question, because I feel like there was more to that question.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Rick.
Now to get directly into your story.
Oh, right. Well, it's about me, too. That's okay. Yeah.
Which is in Safaro, which is what we're trying to plug here for Derek Cusley, if he's watching.
Sorry, Derek. We'll get there.
You said in that story at Home and House of the Devil that everybody meets the devil once in his life. Could you go into the rationale for that?
I thought it was a cool line. When I started writing the story, that line just came to me. But I have there's no theological basis for it or anything like that. I mean, there are famous stories, of course, about people meeting the devil or meeting death or something like, some kind of oppositional figure in the course of their life, and sometimes directly precipitating their death. But I liked the idea. In part with that story, I like the idea of writing a story that was not a Lovecraftian horror story, because so much contemporary horror at the moment, Lovecraft is the default for the sort of supernatural. And I was looking for a way out of that. And so going to a Christian framework seemed to me, okay, we can do this. This is another framework and one that I know, one that I've grown up with. And I thought that, the devil is this figure of this paranoia-inducing figure in I think Christians in general. Once you learn about the devil, you can't not learn about the devil. You can't unlearn that, right? And although your parents, your pastor, your priest, your whatever may say, "Oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it." Of course you worry about it. And the fact that they tell you not to worry about it, that just makes you worry more. You feel it would be more honest if they were like, "Look, you're in real trouble. You've got to do something about this. But instead, they tell you about this figure who rebels against God himself, and loses, but still, rebels against and is cast out and given this infernal domain, right? How could you not be worried about that figure? And you're told that figure, he's really mad at you, all of humanity, and
Yeah.
you as a representative of all of humanity. How could you not be nervous about that? How could you not be frightened by that? So that was my impetus in writing that. And I suppose I wasn't. I wish there were like a folk tradition that said, everyone meets the devil before they die, but to the best of my knowledge, there isn't. Although if this starts that tradition, I would be more than happy with that.
I was going to say, John, that you just thought it was a cool line. That was the first thing I thought of when Rick brought that up. What a cool line that is. And then, there's these other versions of the devil, like you mentioned the devil hating all humanity. There's these other versions of the devil where he doesn't think God pays enough attention to his children, and so he's going to correct that situation. Therefore, God kicks him out. But
Right.
So and then I think my favorite version of the devil is stories where I don't think there's many of them, but stories where you find out that this entity that you think of as God, he's the devil, and
Right.
God's off in some other universe somewhere. So
Yeah, there's been a lot of kind of fascinating takes on the devil. There's a really neat early 19th century or early 20th century novel by Sylvia Townsend Warner called Lolly Willows, which is a very restrained and very subtle novel about a witch. And the subtitle of the novel is The Loving Huntsman. And at the end of the novel, this woman who's sort of, she doesn't really fit in. I think she might be early middle age or entering what the Brits would then have called spinsterhood. So she decides to become a witch. But there's no like sacrificing babies or anything like that. It's just, but she meets the devil, and she realizes that the devil is this figure that she thinks of as the loving huntsman. That he wants to kill us all, but he loves us the same way that the huntsman loves the deer that he's trying to bring down or something like that. And it's the same, like it's the same dynamic in a sense, in that he's hostile towards us, but the underlying emotion is different. And I thought that I mentioned that a little bit in
struggles with that.
Well, yeah. That she feels a certain kind of affection for these things that she's preying on, and I just thought that was kind of cool. I thought, and there are, Michael Moorcock's novel, The Warhound of the World's Pain, has sort of a climactic battle in which the devil leads his forces to the gates of heaven. And winds up having a conversation with God, and God, we don't see that conversation, but when the devil comes out, he's like, I'm in charge now. And God, has just said, okay, you think you can do a better job?
Yeah, you think you can do a better job, buddy?
What we all say to our kids, you think you can do a better job? Go ahead, pay the taxes.
All right, son, you run the universe for a while. Let's see how good you do.
And Richard Kadri's Sandman Slim novels, he does very interesting things with a kind of a fractured godhead, and the devil, and his cosmology is really nutty and a lot of fun.
Which is great because I just started reading his first book 3 days ago. So
they're like those kind of books that once you start reading, I would recommend having 3 or 4 on the bedstand.
They're very much that kind of popcorn supernatural horror, like Jim Butcher or something.
Yeah, I love them. They're terrific.
But I was going to bring up 2 examples, other good examples of the devil in fiction. Mike Carey's Lucifer series, which we had him on the show not long ago.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
A good friend of mine, brilliant take on, and it's more of Lucifer doesn't actually care about humanity. His argument with God had nothing to do with humanity, and he has no desire to take over the world. He has a personal conflict. And then there's
and I want to give a spoiler alert here, so close your ears if you don't want a spoiler alert. But I think that the ending of that series is perfect. I think that the way that at the very end of that series, Lucifer gets to meet God, and God says, well, okay, you know what? Let's like exchange our natures and like mingle our natures. I'll know you, you'll know me. And Lucifer flips him off and is like, no, like he maintains that pride to the end. And the fact that Carrie hit on that and just flies off into the void himself, the fact that Carrie, that is genius to have come up with that.
Well,
okay, you can turn your microphones back on.
We'll have to have
that's
that
the
back on.
classic. I mean, I'm an old school. My favorite depiction of Satan is always going to be Dante in the frozen lake, refusing to apologize and creating his own prison, like flapping his wings, and he keeps freezing the ice that encases him. And I just keep coming back to that. Or I guess speaking of Catholicism, right? Like that inherent nature of he's his own worst enemy. But, you know, like you're saying, there's like infinite variations of the concept, varying from like sympathetic to, you know, terrifying. What's the Keanu Reeves one about lawyers?
Devil's Advocate.
Devil's Advocate. Names. I got names. Yeah, Al Pacino. Come on.
My favorite part is when he's sticking his finger into the holy water and it starts boiling. And he's kind of looking up and marking, you know.
Yeah, how could you? Well, it's funny, isn't it? All the actors, the great actors of that generation, Pacino, De Niro, and Jack Nicholson, right? They've all played, all the male actors have all played the devil in different films.
So, getting back to you, John.
Let's do more Pacino impressions. Come on.
No, you're just so interesting to talk to. So you have, in fact, written a book recently.
Yes.
It's a collection and it has one novella in it. Can you tell the audience a little bit about the book?
Yeah, when I finished my last collection, which is called The Wide Carnivorous Sky and Other Monstrous Geographies, which came out in 2013. You know, once that was done and out, and I thought, okay, what's the next collection going to be? You know, you always want to try to move forward, and I thought first I was thinking about arranging the collection just sort of numerically. What are the last like 10 or 11 stories that I wrote? And I realized that there was this cluster of stories, about a half a dozen stories, all of which were concerned with betrayal in a very central kind of way. And I thought, that's weird. And I couldn't make, you know, there were other published stories that I was like, no, they don't fit with that group. That group is its own thing. And there was one later story that returned to the theme of betrayal. And I was like, okay, that's like a kind of an outlier, this late story where I was coming back to that idea one more time. So I thought, okay, those can go together. And for the original story in the book, I had Saphira, which was a story I had started writing when I was trying to publish my first novel, and which was rejected by everybody. And at one point, I said to my agent, you know, if this novel had been about a vampire hunter, it would have been accepted. And my agent immediately fired back, no, it would have to have been a succubus hunter. And I was like, that's funny. That's a terrible idea. But, you know, so often it's the terrible ideas that the little fornits, you know, the little Stephen King creatures in your head say, well, okay, I know that's a terrible idea, but suppose we had to do something with it anyway, you know, like, what could you do with that? And I kind of love that.
Nice challenge, yeah.
Well, yeah, increasingly, you know, I'll get like invitations to anthologies sometimes, and there'll be part of me that'll be like, Cthulhu and country music, come on. But then there's like another part of me that's like, Cthulhu and country music. Okay, what could you do there? What did Hank Williams Sr. know that the rest of us don't?
Wait, when is this anthology coming out? I need to pre-order it right now. Is John Joseph Adams? Is this his work? Who do I talk to?
Yeah, can I download the country
when I invited
music
John when I invited John to write for Autumn Cthulhu, he replied with, "The fuck are you talking about?" No, he didn't really, but
right. I was like, Cthulhu is clearly a springtime creature. The average mean temperature associated with Cthulhu is 58 degrees, Mr. Davis. Autumn, Strange surprise.
Cthulhu.
By the way,
Right.
though,
Yeah. He's
By the way,
gelatinous.
though,
The leaves get stuck to him.
by the way, though, and I'm not saying this to plug Autumn Cthulhu. I imagine most people listening might have read that collection already. But John, not trying to be disingenuous, but one of my favorite stories that you've ever written is the story you wrote for Autumn Cthulhu.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
I was like, wow. John sends me this email and he says, it's really, really long. You probably don't want to take it. And I was like reading it and I was like, oh yeah, I'll take it.
The funny thing is that story came about. That story came about because Paul Tremblay said to me, Laird Barron, when he came out east, he moved in with me and my wife for a little while. And Paul said to me, you should write like a children's book, like kind of from your son's point of view, like the horror writer in my house kind of thing, And I was like, it's I agree with you. It's a cool idea, but I don't know that I can do a children's book. And it kind of simultaneously or whatever, I was having an email or a Facebook conversation with Justin Steele. And Justin was talking about that guy. Yeah, he was talking about manticores and how he thought manticores were really cool, but nobody writes stories about manticores. And I said, well, first off, Jeff Ford has written a really cool manticore story. But I also said, okay, I'll write you a manticore story at some point. Again, it was like that, how would you do this? And so when the Autumn Cthulhu thing came up, I just thought, wait, what if you brought the manticore and the story of the horror writer living in the house together in some way, except they became poets instead of horror writers. And yeah, it's a sort of it's a tribute, I guess, in a way to my friendship with Laird and the long friendship, the long strange friendship that we've had.
Well, I read it and I thought, this has been said about way too much fiction where it didn't maybe really apply. But I read that and I thought, this is just pure poetry.
Well, thanks.
Yeah, and I mean, I've already paid him, so I'm being sincere.
But he wants those big royalties. Come on, people. Come on,
yes,
buy the book.
Yes, they're huge. So anyway,
just to finish up with Saphira. So long story short, I just thought when it came time for the book, I like to have an original story in the book. I thought, oh, here's the story about this guy who's chasing this woman, who's chasing this demon that her husband has betrayed her with. And I thought, okay, that's going to be the original story. But in the process of writing it, it grew into, it is literally a short novel. It's about 50,000 words. But I had made people wait so long for the book that I thought, well, you should get a short novel. When you have to wait that long for a collection, you should get a short novel included in it. And then while I was wrapping up Saphira, I didn't really want to do another original story just because the collection was so late. But At Home in the House of the Devil, again, I had started writing that previously. And I thought, this is another betrayal story. These two stories have to kind of bookend the collection so that you have a story about an infernal character, an infernal monster in the beginning and the devil at the end. And characters are driving across country in different directions, and one's male and one's female. And I was like, all right, go ahead. I talked to Derek, and Derek was, very understanding. And Derek just said, okay, yeah, go ahead with that.
Derek Hussey, Hippocampus Press, who published it.
Yes.
Yeah. Speaking of Derek, I told you this when we did the video test, but I love what he did. The book is available on Kindle Unlimited. So in other words, if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can borrow up to 10 books at a time, and you can snag this one and read it right away without any extra money out of your pocket. On the other end of things, if you want a nice collector's edition cloth bound copy, that's available too. I included both links in the show notes. So yeah, I think it's really great that he did it that way.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the fact that he makes the ebooks really affordable. And Ross Lockhart did that too with the Fisherman. I know, right? Who is this guy, John Langan? You know, it's one thing if you're picking up. We were talking about this before, right? That if you see that Stephen King has a new ebook, a new book out, and you're like, I want the ebook, and it's $15, you'll pay the $15 because it's Stephen King. But if it's me, maybe not so much. So I feel like a $6 or a $7 ebook, that encourages people to take a chance on it. And if you like the book and you think it's great, then you can buy a hard copy. You can either buy the paperback or the hardcover. And I like that. I like having those options available for people.
Yeah, and like I said, he went a mile further and made it available on Kindle Unlimited, which I've got that program. I don't remember how much it is per month, but it's just minimal. And I've read
I think it's about maybe $10, maybe $10 a month, something like that.
I don't even know if it's that much. I don't know. I forget.
Yeah.
But a lot of people like to trash talk Amazon, and I'm sure they deserve it in some ways. But then there's also these great programs like Kindle Unlimited that tend to be great for readers and writers.
Right. Don't trash talk Amazon, Mike. Suddenly the screen goes black.
Oh, believe me, they've taken stuff out on me before. So
we all disappear and never to be seen again.
That's right. Well, Paul Tremblay introduced your book, Saphira and Other Betrayals. One of the things he writes, I've got it in front of me right here, he says, lesser writers, myself included here, often too lazily use ambiguity, I can't talk today, I'm sorry, as a kind of safety net, afraid to commit fully to the supernatural. Perhaps it's a way to handle perceived suspension of disbelief issues. Maybe the ambiguity is mere coyness. What do you think about that? I mean, there's plenty of stories where ambiguity is done right is very satisfying.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Paul is much too hard on himself. I mean, his novels, his recent novels, Cabin at the End of the World, Disappearance at Devil's Rock, and A Head Full of Ghosts, as well as his stories. I've had a chance to read his new story collection, Growing Things. They make use of ambiguity, and I think in the best possible way. There really is to challenge the reader. Sometimes ambiguity is the writer just saying, I don't know, I'm just gonna, I can't make a decision, I can't figure it out, so I'll just say, who knows? But in Paul's case, he knows, and it's very, what he's doing is very, very deliberate.
Disappearance at Devil's Rock was an amazing use of it. An amazing book.
Yeah. No, I know he's really hard on that novel because it didn't get quite the same traction as the novels on either side of it. But I found that novel just utterly heartbreaking. And as the parent of a young child, it's tough to read and yeah, like gripping and compelling in this really awful, and I mean that in the best way, but really awful way. But yeah, I think.
And the doppelganger use. I mean,
yeah.
He had me write a doppelganger. So
yeah, and the Lake Mungo stuff, and
yes.
it's a terrific book, and I think that there are plenty of there are plenty of writers who show the monster, and that isn't good either. Like it's all up to as I see it, to the individual writer. I love to show the monster. I love monsters. I've always loved monsters. And whether that goes back to comic books or whether that goes back to watching, Godzilla Week on the 4:30 movie, or whatever. I love
bring it up before I did, didn't you?
Yeah, I was trying to figure out how to get the Godzilla reference.
How do we segue? Because Mike promised me we weren't going to talk about me. We were going to talk about Godzilla.
Exactly. I was like, come on, man.
Godzilla, King of the Monsters. What do you think?
Yes.
Saw that trailer?
Yes. I love Godzilla movies. I mean, I just always have, and I cannot remember the first story that I ever wrote. That I remember anyway. I was in first grade, and it was King Kong versus Godzilla. And the reason I wrote the story was because the teacher said to us, "You can illustrate the story that you write." And I was like, "That's awesome! I want to draw King Kong versus Godzilla except I didn't really know what Godzilla looked like at that point. My classmates talked about him, but the only picture I had seen that I thought might be King Kong versus Godzilla was actually Son of Kong versus whatever the monster is that he fights at the end of that movie. It almost looks like a sort of Ray Bradbury's Venusaur. So I thought that's what Godzilla looked like this sort of four-legged lizard thing. And so, yeah, I wrote a story, I was King Kong walking through the woods, and I saw Godzilla, and I thought, oh, no, it's Godzilla. And he breathed fire on me, and he set my chest hair on fire. And then I picked up a lake and dumped it on him and killed him, And even at the time, I thought, how could he pick up a lake? That's not possible. But the story demanded it, so I just went with it. Those creatures were they were part of that continuing, almost like, how would you put it, invasion of Japanese culture that happened in the 60s and the 70s. What was the TV show? Battle of the Planets, too. That was another big one, G-Force, and Voltron and so on later. And so many of them had giant monsters in them, too. So, yeah, I loves me the giant monsters. Every now and again... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to ask. I'm sure the answer is yes, but you saw the trailer to Godzilla, King of the Monsters?
Many times. Many times. Yeah,
So many
times. Singing along,
Doesn't it look... Wow, it looks fantastic.
Yeah, I'm keeping my fingers crossed. I'm really keeping my fingers crossed.
Yeah, it looks like it also has the girl from Stranger Things.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it does.
With her, yeah. That probably cost a little extra to get her.
But it's usually, Ken Watanabe gets like the best line in the movie. Last time it was let them fight. This time it's we would be his pets. And I'm like, okay, I'm with you, Ken.
I want to be excited, but I saw the last one where they kept promising us Bryan Cranston. He's in it for like 4 minutes or something.
Oh, I know. You're lying. And I was like, yes, Bryan Cranston. And then it's like, no, Bryan Cranston.
There also wasn't a whole lot of Godzilla in the last one. It looks like this is just going to be a monster party, right?
There better be. There better be a monster party.
It's going to be a full-on city-destroying monster porn. It's going to be rad.
I just hope, the thing is, they said, there's, at least 17 of these monsters. And I just hope they didn't, run out of ideas. They've got, the first few, Rodan and Mothra, the really good ones. But then I hope they're not just like, oh, and look. Because remember there were some of those, the Japanese ones, like the giant spider or whatever.
Yeah.
Or
the giant fish.
The giant lobster.
We may be getting the giant. It looks like we're getting the giant spider because there's something coming out of it.
The desert.
I think coming out of the oil of the desert. There's either a scorpion or a spider or something similar.
Yeah, it better be some kind of crazy monster spider. Because if it's just a big spider, I'm going to be like, guys, come on. Don't do this to me again.
Well, it's interesting. You're talking about, some horror you need to show the monster and some you don't. In Godzilla, you need to show the monster. I need to see some monster on monster action.
Yeah.
It's funny. Every few years, Laird Barron and I will say, we should write a story together. And the first time we did that, I said, you're right, we should write a story together. What do you want to write? And before I'd even finished the question, Laird said, Godzilla versus Cthulhu. And I was like, yeah.
What is he crazy? There's no contest.
Yeah, it's a really quick fight, man.
I should ask, well, you're the expert, John. I should ask you who would win.
Well, what was funny was that Laird, and this is before Cthulhu, this was back when zombies were still the big thing, right? So, a few years ago, I said to Laird, I was like, hey, should we do, we should get to that idea. And he said, no, it's done. Lovecraft's it's all over the place now. It wouldn't be cool anymore. But I still may write it. And yeah, I figured that Godzilla would be some kind of ancient bioweapon, basically, that had been created by some later race to deal with Cthulhu.
That's a nice take.
But see, then, I don't know if you guys saw, and here's my talk about nerd, the Gamera movies. There was a trilogy of Gamera movies that were made maybe in the late 90s.
It was mid-90s.
Do you know the ones that...
because that same director directed my favorite Godzilla sequel, the GMK Godzilla, King Ghidorah, Mothra, all out attack film.
So this is the one, right, where we find out that Gamera is actually an ancient bioweapon, and that he's covered in these little like teardrop-shaped pieces of metal. And if you get a hold of one of those, you can enter into this kind of sympathetic mental relationship with him and help him to destroy whatever the other bio monsters are. And so after I saw that, I thought, I may have to wait a little bit, because that was kind of my idea for Godzilla, that there would be a sort of a human pilot, as it were, that would be needed for Godzilla. But that may go at some point. That and the Cthulhu and country music, they may form part of the next collection.
Well, who did Laird think would win?
He didn't really. I think he was actually kind of in favor of Cthulhu, but I may be putting words in his mouth on this one, because Cthulhu is just kind of amorphous and not entirely of this material plane, and Godzilla is so much a creature of this material plane. But I thought the energy weapon would do something. I thought, when the energy weapon, when Godzilla or when Cthulhu pops, as he's sort of trying to recoalesce, the energy weapon would just destroy him.
Isn't there a line? You watched the trailer more than I did, but am I thinking of a different movie? Isn't there a line in this Godzilla trailer saying something like it's their world, not ours? Or,
yeah, it's Godzilla's world. We just live in it.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
And that actually plays off an idea from the first film, where the big deal was that the monsters were like an infection, and Godzilla was the Earth's white blood cells to, he's there to defeat the monsters.
Well, Ghidorah will probably be an infection, because if they follow the early Toho films, he's from outer space, where all the rest would be indigenous.
Well,
I'm curious how they're going to handle that.
Did you guys ever see Godzilla Final Wars, the last one that Toho made in the 2000s?
I'm afraid I did, yes.
So that's the one where it's got Don Fry is like this American that kills.
Right, the samurai submarine captain, yeah.
And they fit in like so many Godzilla monsters. They actually took the '98 bad Godzilla murdered film, made him the monster.
The perfect one, yes.
He has a great scene where like he's charging at the real Godzilla, and when I say real Godzilla, they literally, that's how they keep phrasing it. It's like he's Zilla, and then because they took the god out of Godzilla, that's how Toho put it. And he charges at him and he just hits him and kills him in like 2 seconds. So that movie had a scene where I think the main characters were like mutants or something that had like psi powers, and they were either aliens or from the future, where I can never keep it straight. Yeah, and he helps Godzilla's breath be more powerful to destroy Ghidorah. Sorry, spoiler, Ghidorah's in the movie. You guys laugh, but he was a surprise entrant, as though they're going to put in King Caesar, the soccer-playing dog, but not King Ghidorah, right?
So you had an armored monster that just seemed to have that grew to 3 heads.
Yeah, exactly.
So John, I have to ask this, since we're on this subject. What did you think of Cloverfield? This was like 1999, 2000, right?
I liked Cloverfield in some ways very much. I loved the conceit of a found footage giant monster movie. It's a writing challenge for me that I've never been able to fulfill. I've used giant monsters. There's one in The Fisherman, sort of briefly. There's I've got a couple of stories where giant monsters appear, but I've never written like a really good kind of kaiju story. And like 15, 16 years ago, my older son, who's going to be 29 this summer, he had actually given me the idea to write about a skeleton, which is what I wrote about in my second story, Mr. Gaunt, a long time ago. And that story had done pretty well for me. And so I said, you got any other ideas? And he said, write a giant monster story. And ever since that time, I've been trying to write a giant monster story. So a film like Cloverfield that took this really interesting approach, that something's happening, there's this crazy thing happening, and here we are at ground level just watching it happen and trying to escape. That part of it I just loved. I just thought was terrific.
Made it more real in a way.
Yeah. And I think actually that there was something about the way that the film that you were seeing had been filmed over a previous video, and every now and again bits of that previous video would shine through. That created a really interesting effect. I think the problem the movie got into was that it started to seem like the Cloverfield monster was like the world's biggest like sort of slasher villain, because everywhere the heroes went, the monster was there. And it just, it started to seem like it was just stalking them. And that part of it, I think it was the limitation of that narrative approach. You want to show what happens at the end. The monster has to keep following them so that you can see what happens with the monster. So I thought that was
or they follow it, which would be just nuts.
Yeah. I thought that was the that was a weakness. But it's like I don't mean to like damn it with faint praise. I mean, I would give it like a strong B+. In some ways, it was a better movie probably than Pacific Rim. Although, my inner 12-year-old just still goes absolutely nuts when he thinks about Pacific Rim. So, and even Pacific Rim 2.
The horrifying thing to me about that Cloverfield monster was it's been a while since I've seen it, so correct me if I get this wrong, but the tiny monsters or whatever they were that fell off of it and infected
the ticks people. Or something.
Yeah. I was like, oh God, that's the worst thing in this film.
The funny thing is, if you watch the original Beast, the only Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, when that beast, it's an unexpectedly horrifying moment. Again, when you're watching that movie, when the beast is injured and it bleeds, its blood is toxic, and it makes people immediately like grievously ill. And I remember being unexpectedly horrified by that and thinking, oh, wait a minute, I thought this was just like a Harryhausen giant monster movie. That's actually kind of freaky.
Yeah. Do you view some kaiju stories as Lovecraftian? They can be in a way, or they can be these two big guys slugging it out.
Yeah, I don't tend to think of in my whatever inner universe, they're not particularly Lovecraftian. I mean, I think Del Toro and Pacific Rim makes them kind of Lovecraftian, in that they're the advanced scouts for these hostile aliens. So I think that he, it's sort of funny, right? Because that's like King Ghidorah as well. It's so I guess you could say in that regard that they are
Portal.
Yeah, they are acting as in that way. He kind of makes them more Lovecraftian. I don't know. I tend to see them. You can't watch, I think, the first Godzilla movie. At least I can't. The original one, and not see it as it's the war. It's the war coming back. And not only obviously the atomic bomb strikes on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but also I think the firebombing of Tokyo. That's absolutely, it seems to me, what that is. After that, I don't know. I don't know that Godzilla, say, like, I don't know if he ever achieves the same metaphorical force that he does in that first film. But that's, I suppose I think that's fine. I mean, I guess in the Matthew Broderick one, well, actually, the Matthew Broderick one, he was French, wasn't he? I mean, because he comes from the French atomic tests that were going on in the late 90s, right? And he's got that big beret.
He was wearing the beret.
Yeah, exactly, the beret, and he's smoking a Galois, and he's like, maybe I will destroy your city. Maybe not. What are you going to do about
it? We've been joined by Pete Rawlick.
Yes, hi Pete, how's it going?
And don't you say anything about the Avengers.
Don't say a word. That's where he's been.
I see it tomorrow, so just everybody keep quiet. That's you too, Kirk.
Yeah. So wait, is Endgame totally? Because I saw it yesterday. My wife and I caught like a 9 a.m. showing. Just like don't talk about it at all.
Don't talk about it.
I'll just tell everything. You guys can distract me.
John. Okay, so for the audience again, and this is in the show notes. The recent collection is Saphira and Other Betrayals. I've got a link to it on Kindle. I've also got a link to the really cool looking cloth edition.
One more thing, John's earlier short story collection, the Wide
The White
Carnivorous
Carnivorous
Sky,
Sky.
that's also on Kindle Unlimited.
Oh, no kidding. Okay.
I've been reading through that this whole week, so.
No, thank you.
I'm a huge fan of The Fisherman. So
Yeah, it was okay. Some moron.
out of his mouth.
Alec.
Somebody blurbed it. You know.
Oh, did you blurb it?
Yeah.
And if you can get it,
Hope you
Mr.
got a
Gaunt,
beer out of that.
Mr. Gaunt, really.
Hang on a second. I'm gonna try something with Rawlick. No, all right.
Oh, not gonna work.
You can't blame a guy for trying.
No.
What? I just blurbed your book. You owe me a beer.
You don't drink.
Well, we'll figure out a substitute of some sort.
Pete's itchy. He's scratching his back.
Yeah. John, so do you have a favorite book or short story of your own that you've written? Or is it always just the latest one, you think?
I am very fond of a short story called Homemade Monsters that I was immensely proud of when I wrote it. It appeared in a collection called the Doll Collection. Ellen Datlow edited several years ago.
Oh, yeah.
It's a short story, and it's about Godzilla. It's rooted in me growing up before you could get Godzilla toys, and I had to make my own Godzilla toys by taking all my old Star Trek figures, the sort of 8.5-inch ones, and I stripped them and painted them green and gave them like cardboard, armor, basically, tails and spikes and that sort of stuff. And then I would build little sets out of cardboard for them to kind of rampage in. And so it's about that, and it's also about being sort of bullying experiences when I was a kid. And I just absolutely love this story. I'm very, very proud of it. And as is usual, right? The things that you love and you're most proud of, like, just sink with that. They sink like a stone, so yeah, that'll probably appear a couple of collections from now, I think. I
did buy that, but I haven't got around to reading it. But first of all, it's Ellen, so of course.
Yeah.
But
so you better buy it, yeah.
Yeah. Secondly, my wife is scared to death of dolls. So
she should be.
Yeah. So I think I'm going to listen to the audiobook version with her on a trip sometime.
Oh, she'll thank you for that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, thank me by breaking my nose or something.
Whatever happened to Mike Davis this week on the Lovecraft Easy?
I just have a question about the Godzilla doll.
It explains a lot, doesn't it?
Did you use the Gorn from Star Trek as the basis?
No, it was like Captain Kirk. So you have to imagine William Shatner in like a Godzilla outfit, Shatner. I'm going to destroy Tokyo,
So, John, in the 70s, my we didn't have VCRs, right? We didn't have any, right? My parents bought me this big. It was probably about the size of a small suitcase, like a big valise, but it was all molded plastic. It was a black and white television with a radio and an audio tape deck in it.
Well,
nice.
We're spoiled.
Nice.
And I found out that through trial and error that if you pushed a couple buttons, you could record television audio directly from TV.
Yeah.
So by the end of the year, I had a stack of about 50 tapes of all the Godzilla films.
Nice.
Just the audio with all the commercials and everything. And I would sit there in the dark and I would play those tapes over and over again.
That is really funny because I did the same thing with only one movie. I didn't get to see very many movies because it was, this horrible thing. But one of the movies that my dad rented was Superman 2. And, of course, I'm nuts about DC heroes. I recorded, when he was at work, I played the whole movie, recorded the audio of Superman 2, and I listened to that thing over and over again. So, I'm sorry, John, I cut you off.
No, I was going to say that it's Yeah, it's funny. I got a little cassette player when I was probably about 12 or 13, and it was one of those ones that had a single tape deck, and it had a single earplug that you could listen to things on. And my parents got me the cassette tape soundtrack for Raiders of the Lost Ark, and there was obviously no dialogue, but still listening to that, I would listen to that and I would envision, oh, this is the scene in the market, and this is here's where they're opening the Ark of the Covenant, but I'm thinking with the Godzilla films too, so many of them are just that ponderous music, right? Maybe there's a Godzilla roar in the background, but so you're just like listening, what is he doing now? What is he destroying now,
John, what are a couple of books and or stories you've read recently that you'd recommend to the audience?
Oh man, I have so many.
And also you mentioned you wanted to plug a few because you review books for Locus, right?
Yeah, I've been kind of on accidental hiatus the last couple of months because of stuff with the day job and trying to get some other new stories written.
Right.
For
you said to me you'd like to plug a few of those.
But yeah, so there's a whole bunch of I have a list.
Oh, wow. Great.
And I'll just go through a few quickly because there is as a reviewer, I feel at this time there is so much good stuff out there. I can't read all of it, and I can't review all of it. And I make it because of that, I make it a principle only to review things that I like. It's not to say there are no bad books out there. I get it, but I'm less interested in being a kind of a gatekeeper and saying, this is good, this is bad. I'm more interested in saying, look at this, look at this, look at this. Because I think that's, I don't know, I think that does more good, I guess.
I love hearing that from you, John, because I'm the same way. You have a lot of people who listen to you. If you're lucky enough to have people who listen to you or read what you write, then okay, I didn't like this book, but is it me or is it really a bad book? And if I say this is a horrible book, then maybe I'm really doing a disservice when actually I was a crab the day I read it.
That was the same, back when I was a video game critic, writing an article bashing a game just was it felt like such a waste of energy and time.
Yeah.
And it was so much more useful, particularly in the internet era. I totally understand the function of Lester Bangs and Pauline Kael and the pre-internet. You go to the record store, you've got your $20. What are you going to buy? But in the internet era, when you have infinite media barking for your attention, it was your energy as a critic is better served as hey, this is good, you should check it out.
Right.
Functions. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And look, I'm that's just me. I mean, there are other people who prefer to write their takedowns and whatever, and I wouldn't exactly say more power to them, but if that's what makes your boat float, then okay. But sure.
It's okay to be wrong.
Yeah. Well, I think that right now, I mean, holy cow, there's just so much good stuff. I'll just mention I'll try to squeeze in as many things as I can. Glenn Hirschberg's, I know you guys had Glenn on not that long ago, but Glenn's vampire novel, Nothing to Devour, this wraps up the vampire trilogy that he's been writing. And I really think that, no harm to Justin Cronin, but I think this is the major vampire trilogy of the last 10 years. Oh, and wow. I think that it's probably suffered from being released every couple of years. I think that this book needs to be read. I think the 3 books need to be read basically in an omnibus edition. They need to be read one right after the other. You can think about it as an 80s doorstopper horror novel that's just been broken up into 3 separate novels. And Glenn is a fantastic writer, and I think this is just a monumental achievement that And I think pretty much all the books have flown under the radar. And in part, the second book, Good Girls, had this horrible cover design. I mean, okay, I know I just said I don't like to say anything bad about anybody, but I think that cover design was grievously bad, and it made it look like a kind of young adult kind of quasi-romance novel. I don't know if whoever was in marketing thought, oh, this will make it appeal to the Twilight crowd, but no, you made you.
But I
something.
understand what you're saying. That you're pointing out that, hey, this is why maybe it didn't sell as much as it should have, because it's a great book.
Yeah, and so if it's the whole run, don't walk, and pick up these books, pick up Motherless Child, Good Girls, and Nothing to Devour. It's a fantastic achievement.
Awesome.
I got to read Laird Barron's new novel, Black Mountain, which is the second novel in his Isaiah Coleridge series, and Laird said in a tweet while he was writing the novel, it was something like, my horror novel skinned a crime novel and is wearing it. And that's actually not a bad description of the book. It is a crime novel, but it reads in a lot of ways like a horror novel. I actually think it has a lot in common with Peter Straub's The Throat, although I know from talking to Laird that was not a conscious influence on his part. But I just think there's this sort of horrifying monster, and they both actually have a certain resemblance to Dracula, that there's this kind of monster that is sort of lurking in the monstrous figure who's lurking in the background. And the closer you get to meeting him, the more you're thinking as the reader, I don't think we really want to meet this guy. I don't think that's such a good idea.
Yeah, this is the second one. You definitely want to read these two in order.
And I think that the first one I enjoyed the heck out of. I think they're grimly funny. Laird has a very dark sense of humor, and it really comes across in these books. There's a line in the first novel where Coleridge works, or he sort of is allied, I guess might be the right word, with the mafia. And at one point they do something terrible to somebody, and he thinks, oh. And he comes from a bad family, Coleridge, and so the mafia does something terrible to someone, and he thinks, they really do treat you like family.
Laird's. I'm sorry, I'll stop interrupting, but I was just Laird's hit the big time, and you know how you can tell that is when you see his book at Walmart.
Yeah,
that's how you know you hit the big time.
I thought it was the big time when you didn't come on this show anymore.
That too.
What are you trying to say, Matt? What are you trying to say?
No, nothing. I'm muting.
No,
it's a
man.
stepping stone.
Right. He just steps in, stabs me, and then steps back, and it's like, I didn't do nothing.
Go on, John.
Carrie Laban, A Hawk in the Woods. It's Carrie's first novel. She's been writing for probably, I think she's been publishing probably for about 10 years now. And this is a novel that I think certain reviewers were like, I'm not sure I get this. It's a very Lovecraftian novel. And specifically, it's a novel that takes as its starting point The Thing on the Doorstep. And if you know that, and then you read the novel, it makes a lot more sense to you. But it's really terrific.
What's the title again?
It's called A Hawk in the Woods, and that's from Word Horde Press. I had a chance to read 8.
I'm trying to think if I know her. I don't think I do. Could you spell her name?
Laben, Carrie Laban.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I had a chance to read a long novella from A.C. Weiss called Catfish Lullaby. I don't think it's going to be out until maybe August, but keep an eye out for that one. It's about it's set in the Deep South, I think in the Louisiana Bayou, and it's about the focus is on a young sheriff. Although it's a multi-generational story, but the greater part of it deals with a young sheriff who's dealing with a local legend that is probably true, but that's also probably more complicated than anybody thought it was. Weiss is a terrific writer. And it's really nice to see her working at length like this. Nathan Ballingred, Wounds, holy cow. Ballingred wrote North American Lake Monsters a few years ago. It was this kind of seminal collection. But, the thing is, you could describe North American Lake Monsters as, sort of Raymond Carver-esque dirty realism meets monsters, meets, and a lot of classic monsters, the vampire, the werewolf, This book is completely different. This book is Baroque and it's strange, and there's it has what I think is one of the great horror stories of the last 10 years, a story called The Visible Filth, which was just made into a movie called Wounds, which thus the name of the collection, which I think was originally titled The Atlas of Hell and Other Stories. But Nathan is he just goes in completely different directions in this collection.
So The Visible Filth released several years ago as a novella.
From like thinking horror. No, not thinking horror. What are they called? Oh, maybe it is thinking horror. Bob Pastorella.
It was a fantastic story. Yeah.
Yeah. I read Tremblay's Growing Things, and he'll hurt me if I don't say that it's really great. No, it is. It's terrific. It's got it has some Paul's progression as a writer of short fiction, from his first collection to his second collection and now to his third collection. I mean, he's improved so much that his climb has almost been vertical. I mean, it's been such a steep climb upwards, and there's just terrific things in here. Some of the stuff ties in to his novels, to Head Full of Ghosts, and also to Disappearance at Devil's Rock. So I think this is going to be. All of these are what you should be spending, your children's inheritance on.
Is that book out now?
It's not. It's going to be out in July.
Okay.
So there's time for you to save money, actually. I read this a novel written by a Sri Lankan author whose last name is Weeraratne, and the novel is called Zeelam, Zeelam, and it's a zombie novel set in Sri Lanka, and it's about a zombie outbreak in Sri Lanka that's sort of in the process of happening when the novel picks up. And it's fast paced. It's intelligent. It makes some interesting observations about Sri Lanka, which I honestly know very, very little about. But I just sort of, I'm Facebook friends with a writer named Marianne Moharanj. Her family's from Sri Lanka. She is making a visit to Sri Lanka, and Weeraratne was one of the writers, a young writer that she said, oh, you guys should check out his book. And I thought, oh, okay, why not? Nick Kaufman has co-written a novel called 100 Fathoms Below, which is about a monster on a submarine. What's not to like? S.P. Miskowski, I know you guys had her on not that long ago.
Episode Dinosaurs on a Spaceship.
Yeah, I mean, come on, monster on a submarine. Come on, S.P. Miskowski's The Worst Is Yet to Come. She's a terrific writer. I think she's just a powerhouse. And The Worst Is Yet to Come. I loved her last novel, I Wish I Was Like You. And this novel, you can tell it's SP writing. Her style's really distinctive, but it is very much its own thing. It goes in some really interesting directions. I think you don't have to have read her Skaloot cycle of novels. It probably helps. I need to go back and look at a couple of them.
I had heard that the Worst Is Yet to Come is a self-help book. Is that
Thomas Ligotti's self-help book? I guess the other Molly Tanzer. I've been reading her most recent novels, Creatures of Will and Temper, and Creatures of Want and Ruin. And I think Molly going to be a guest at Necronomicon Providence this summer? I think
so. Yeah.
Yeah, they're these wild historical novels, and I'm kind of waiting to see She is another one due out, and I'm kind of waiting to see how the connections among them continue to develop. And just the other thing, a couple of journals. I got the new issue of Vastarian the other day, and man, those guys are doing fantastic work. I mean, that's just yeah, it's such, you know, it's obviously it's a labor of love, but you know, some labors of love are not worth the effort, and this one really is.
It's true.
And I got volume 2 of Thinking Horror, which I've been waiting for a long time, and it has some, you know, wonderful interviews with Steve Raznick-Tem. There's a great article by Gemma Files in it. And, you know, I kind of feel like, I guess because like I come from academia, I appreciate these kinds of I don't know. Look, the reason I appreciate the Lovecraft e-zine is I appreciate the chance for a bunch of people to sit down and talk about this stuff. And yeah, you know, you joke around and you know, Matt hurts my feelings, but you know, you try, you still try to say something about this stuff, and I like that. I think that's actually kind of important for like the health of the field, I guess.
Thanks.
John, I don't mean to interrupt, but are you going
interrupting, only complimenting me.
Are you going to Necronomicon?
I am. I'm planning to go to Necronomicon Providence. I will be the guest of honor, one of the guests of honor at Nikon this year, along with Megan. Along with Megan Abbott. So she's really the reason you should, because you know you never see Megan Abbott. At least I don't, you know, anywhere. So come see Megan Abbott, and I'll be there as well. And I'll be at ReaderCon.
I already bought my ticket, so I just need to make sure I had someone other than Matt and Pete to hang out with is the thing. So
what?
You don't want to hang out with Pete. That nothing good comes. Nothing, you know, that's yeah.
So a couple of years ago, Megan Abbott was at Miami Book Fair, and I swear nobody went to see her talk.
That's insane.
And I was
that is utterly insane. Yeah. Read her stuff too, everybody.
Yeah.
And just wrote in the text chat that the public can't see. Mike, I have to go. Can we have John on again like 5 more times in the next few weeks?
Because he's a glutton for punishment, or he wants to watch Matt make fun of me over and over again.
I think he thinks you're cool or something. I don't know.
No, that can't be it. That's never been the case. Both my sons would swiftly correct that notion.
Yeah, mine would correct it for me as well. Yeah.
Speaking of cool, John, did I see a picture of you fly fishing with your son the other day?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I was not fly fishing. I don't. My son is a self-taught fisherman, and in part self-taught fly fisherman. Although he's been to different fly fishing camps and that sort of stuff. But yeah, I took him up to the Catskills. He really just wanted to get his line in, and my wife and I bought him he wanted a shorter fly fishing pole. Most of the rods are like, I don't know, 7 or 8 feet long or something like that. Yeah. And he wanted like a 5 or 6 feet so that he could get into tighter spots. So I was like, you know what, let's just go. And so I actually brought my volume of Thinking Horror with me, and I was like, okay, I'll just sit and read and you do your thing.
Oh, you didn't fish?
No. Dude, I know what's in the streams up there. There's no way I'm fishing.
Okay, you got any more authors that you wanted to plug before we finish?
Off the top of my head, I mean, this is a little bit of shameless self-promotion.
Sure, that's why you're here.
Robert Wilson's Ashes and Entropy anthology. I have a story in that. It's a noir anthology. I have a noir story. Laird has a story in that. Nadia Balkan. Maybe I think Christy DeMeester and maybe Damien Angelica Walters too. So it's some really good people in that, and me. This coming fall, I'll have a novella in Ellen Datlow's forthcoming anthology of ghost stories, Echoes. She wanted to put together a sequel to The Dark, which was her big ghost story anthology from like 2002 or thereabouts, and I really wanted to write a story that was a kind of a tribute to the late great Lucius Shepard, whose story Limbo is kind of the major novella in that collection. And so I tried to write something that was a kind of thematic response to that story, and using a title that I kind of Nadia Balkan had kind of come up with, and she was like, "You can use that." So yeah, whatever. 20,000 words later, here we were.
Isn't that story a sort of prequel to Sephira?
It has. It shares a character with Sephira. Yeah, there's the character of the medium who shows up in Sephira also shows up in this story.
Wait, can you pronounce that name for me? Because as I was reading the book, I was like, "How is it like?"
You mean Madame Thesostris?
Yep, that was not.
So trees.
I don't.
My head. Okay.
I'm not 100% sure that that's the right pronunciation. That's just how I pronounce it. If she turns me into a toad, you'll be like, "Oh no, that was the wrong pronunciation."
That name is from T.S. Eliot.
Yeah, from the Wastelands. Yeah.
Oh, well,
and somebody, it was funny. Somebody, I think it was like Des Lewis did one of his real-time Gestalt reviews of the story of the short novel Sephira, and he's making all these connections to T.S. Eliot. And I have read The Wastelands and studied The Wastelands a ton of times, but when I was writing the book, I wasn't conscious of a lot of this stuff. But then Des is like, "Well, look at this and look at that," and you just stroke your beard and you just say yes. Yeah. That's why you have a beard.
I wonder, the Wasteland can kind of be connected. That's one of those stories that's like anything about anything the Wasteland's probably dipped its toe into. Sorry, yeah. Yeah,
no, I think there was some okay, so when I was a kid, I read King Lear a lot in college and graduate school. I wrote papers on it. I love that play. I've taught that play a bunch of times. When I wrote my first novel, House of Windows, somebody, again, a critic said, "Well, obviously it's King Lear." And you could have knocked me over with the proverbial feather. When I heard that, I immediately thought, "Oh my God, of course, yes, absolutely." But it had not, in the couple of years it took me to write that book and revise that book and sell that book, not once did it occur, King, and I think I was probably teaching King Lear during that time. It never once occurred to me that Lear was in that book. So maybe that's good. I don't know.
Well, that's always one of the. It's so nuts. I have a lot more acceptance for writers who are like, I didn't intentionally copy that, but my subconscious, look, man, what regurgitates out of there is what regurgitates out. And so even in my stuff, I know I'll always see something that at the time I think I'm being clever, but then I'll realize, oh, I read that book 2 years ago. It filtered in my brain for a while, and then it spat out in this way. It's just that funky... Yeah, just the way that originality works.
As a sometimes composer, that happens too. Like I would compose something and then listen to it, a week later and think, "Oh shit, did I accidentally steal that from, this song or this piece of classical music?" That type of thing.
Yeah.
So
So you guys know I'm a big fan of horror movies. I watch a lot of horror movies.
And you have a beard.
And I have a beard. But
yes.
when I'm sitting down to write, I have gotten used to watching British murder mysteries because I don't steal from them. But it's not conscious. It's just that whatever's going in has to, influences what I'm writing. So I have to be very careful about what I choose to watch.
That's the advantage.
Give it a couple of years.
If you only read cryptic old books, then no one will catch you. with all the stuff you're stealing.
The lawyer speaks and gives us his legal opinion.
That's
If
right.
it's in the public domain already, it's okay.
You're also going to find out that some writer who you never knew about did something similar.
Right.
Yeah.
Just to use an example, I recognize the name Sosostris not because of the Wasteland, but because John Tynes wrote a King and Yo story. Was Eliot's Madame Sosostris.
Yeah,
it's called Sosostris, by the way.
I was it Sosostris? Is that the
Title?
Oh no, I meant the pronunciation because I'm doing Sosostris.
Yeah. I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm just saying.
All right.
It was an earlier story. First I thought I got to dig up this John Tynes story. It seems that John Langan's having continuity with it, and then when I read your notes, it goes to one of your own.
Well, I also think that I don't want to poo-poo originality, but I also think that people stress themselves out about it. And I think that it's always possible to find an antecedent of some kind for what you've done before. And I think the question becomes increasingly, whatever the idea is, how do you treat it? And how do you make it your own? And I think that has to be, for me anyway, as a writer, that's really the question that I'm worried about. I'm worried about how am I addressing this thing? What am I doing with it? Because, I would still really like to write a kaiju story. And how do you write that's talk about a certain kind of set form. Talk about something that's really been done already. So if I'm worried about, how can I come up with a kaiju that nobody's ever seen before? I'm probably going to drive myself nuts. But if I think, how can what is my take on the kaiju going to be? Then I think that's for me as an artist anyway, that's more productive.
Yeah. It's even with the Lovecraft himself, either he's rewriting his old story, or he's not rewriting them, but he's using his old plots, or particularly if you start reading horror from that era and you realize how much he's kind of borrowing from Olaf Stapledon and we were talking about the Great God Pan or Dracula. And you just realize, it's okay to be influenced by other people. That's kind of a part of what makes something successful, I think, is that there's a little bit of the audience is familiar with what you're going for. I mean, thank God, I think the reason Cthulhu, the original Call of Cthulhu story is great is because Lovecraft had the sense to get away from that Victorian parlor narrative. No, Pete's shaking his head.
I know, he's shaking his head. He's like, I'll tell you about Cthulhu. I've been out fishing.
Cthulhu is a rewrite of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Oh, what? Really?
I think you're absolutely right. I think he'd written Dagon and he saw 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and then he'd read Bram Stoker's Dracula and was like, let's spin this up a little bit and make it interesting.
Randolph, the
counterpoint.
The Case of Charles Dexter Ward is Dracula.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Absolutely. Yeah.
By the way, Ben left a few minutes ago. He does not have a beard. Kurt, Matt, and Rick.
I don't have a beard. Yeah.
You guys might want to start working on that.
No, if I try to grow a beard, it's just pathetic. I get a little teeny goatee.
A teeny goatee is better than no goatee.
I mean, we're all basking in Murray's shadow with that mane.
That's true. That's true.
Getting back to that, though, you could also be Dean Koontz and rewrite yourself over and over and over. He has so many plots that are almost exactly the same. There's always this smart dog.
Okay, I just got to tell a completely... There's a famous Italian composer we all know named Vivaldi who wrote the Four Seasons, and someone said, he wrote more than 500 concertos, and another critic said, no, he wrote one concerto 500 times.
500 times, yeah.
John, thanks for being on the show. Really
Hey,
great.
thank you for having me, guys. I really like the idea of debuting the collection with you guys, because this is one of, the Lovecraft e-zine is one of the things I look forward to every week. And I'm always like, all right, what joke is Rowlick going to be in the middle of when we come into the show, and yeah, there's some, I love all the different guests that you guys have on. I think increasingly you always mix it up, and you've always got, and I like the fact that you're willing to have fans on as well. I mean, that to me is really, it's, I can remember, like when I was a kid, when I was in my early 20s, I was living in Albany, and I would go to the New York State Writers Institute, which is a fantastic thing that they have there. They bring about a dozen different writers to the Albany area every year, and they would I would meet them, and they were kind of, a lot of them were kind of jerks. And I can remember the first ReaderCon I went to, and I'd only written a couple of stories, and everybody was really nice, and I was like, holy cow, this is really cool. Like, Joe Lansdale talks about finding your tribe. And he means it, I think, in a particular group of writers that you really hang with. But I think in a more general sense, it is a good community. It has its problems. I know. I'm not trying to shortchange any of that stuff. But I love the fact that you guys have like all these different people on, both in terms of writers and in terms of fans and different kinds of creators. It's a really important resource to have, and especially it can really feel really restoring sometimes after everything else that's going on in the world.
Well, honestly, that means a lot coming from you, John. Thank you.
Except for Rowlick, I hate that guy.
Exactly. Well,
Everybody hates me. Don't hate me because I'm gorgeous. Just hate me.
I think that
That's not a problem.
I think that a podcast like this should be informative. You should learn things, but it also should be fun. You know, you should also get this. The best compliment I get from people who listen and they'll write me an email, say the best compliment I get is people feel like they're hanging out with a bunch of friends. You know, discussing, all this writer nerd stuff that we like to talk about. So yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Name of the book again is Saphira and Other Betrayals, and I've got the links in the show notes. Do check out The Fisherman too, which was the last one. That's a novel. Saphira and Other Betrayals is a collection, obviously. I hope you'll come on again soon, John.
Absolutely.
We've got like about 10 minutes worth of other things to talk about, so you can either leave or stay. Whatever you want to do is fine.
Stay and heckle, I think. Yeah.
I just wanted to. The next subject I wanted to talk about Avengers Endgame.
No spoilers.
I could have used. They didn't really have to show Thanos' full frontal nudity. That's all I'm gonna say.
What, really?
And that explained why he did what he did. Talk about overcompensating.
Yeah, I didn't expect him to use tongue so much. That was a bit much.
I've said this before and I'll say it again. Thanos is an idiot. I mean, just taking Earth's population and say 1950. What do we have, 9 billion people on the planet right now? We had a hell of a lot less than 4.5 billion people on the planet in the mid 20th century, and we still had the same problems, So there were still people starving.
Have all of us seen Shazam?
I have not seen it yet.
That's okay.
All right. I'll just say I liked it. That's all.
Okay.
In fact, it's my favorite DC Extended Universe movie at this point.
Anybody, any Game of Thrones watchers? Are we?
Yeah.
Little Eldritch. Yeah.
Tonight should be a good one. Is all I can say.
It better be. They've been spinning their wheels. Like all last season was just moving people around, and then this season.
Okay, pick 3 people this episode who are going to die.
Oh, the Hound, one of the dragons, and
Jorah Mormont.
Yeah, there's a lot of the B teams going down this episode. They're going to warm us up.
Right. So I thought The guy with the flaming sword, Beric Dondarrion, he's gone. He's toast.
Okay, well, I've seen like the first 3 episodes of season 1, so I have no idea what you're talking about. Did you guys see
I
that
didn't
there?
really appreciate them putting Thanos in it, though.
Yeah, I can't believe that Thor is going to show up in episode 4 of Game of Thrones.
Really? Okay. Tape that for me. They're doing a new Salem's Lot movie. Have you guys heard this?
Ooh.
No, but
Nope,
awesome.
It's got James Wan attached to it. I'm done. I have no.
And he promises it's going to be even better than Pet Sematary. So
Salem's Lot is one of my all-time favorites. It's basically our town, except instead of nothing happening, a vampire kills everyone. That's fantastic.
I guess my joke fell flat. Again, John, dad joke. I guess this Pet Sematary, the new one, is bad.
Yeah. Look, I thought The Conjuring was bad.
It's not bad. That's a good movie.
No, The Conjuring makes no sense whatsoever.
I don't care. It doesn't have to make sense. It's a ghost story, or I don't know what it is. Still liked it.
Is The Conjuring the movie with the doll?
No, it's several before that in that series.
Oh.
It's the first one.
Okay, how about this? Did you guys see the new Joker trailer?
Yeah.
It didn't do anything for me.
Oh my god, it looks good.
I'm sick of Joker origin stuff. Why can't we know who he is, just jump into an adventure?
We'll go with you wrong on that. All right, so you guys know I'm a fan of audio dramas. I saw this little piece of news earlier today on joeblow.com. If it'll ever load, there it is. Lance Henriksen joins Michael Biehn in Alien 3 audio drama.
Ooh.
Yeah.
But not the Alien 3 that we got. The Alien 3 that was written by Gibson and not produced.
Oh, okay.
So this might be really good, and it's going to be available as an Audible original.
I guess I'm in one of the small camps who Alien 3 is a flawed movie, but I also enjoy that they decided to take the Alien formula and do it into like a Christ figure just for, well, that was different. Kudos, David Fincher. Didn't see that coming.
I did not like the fact that they ruined the ending for Aliens.
Yeah.
Secret ballot.
Yeah.
So,
except the problem with that is that Dark Horse had done, I think, 2 standalone comics of aliens based on the Christ image before.
Yeah.
And had done it so well. And I don't think it worked well in what they finally produced.
Oh, no, the third movie has like huge. I just liked what they were going for, and I thought Fincher is like baby David Fincher, right? You're like, cool, this guy's going to go on to do some neat stuff.
The sad part that the problems I have with the later Alien and Predator movies is that I can watch them and I can watch where pieces were cherry picked from the Dark Horse comics.
Yep.
And say those really, really worked well, and screwed up everything else.
Yep.
Well, it looks like it's available on May 30, and it says you can pre-order it, but it's in my experience, if you're an Audible member, that these Audible originals sometimes are free. So who knows? I don't know. If at the very least you can buy it with a credit, but I don't know. Lance Henriksen, I'm a big fan of his.
Yeah.
So, all right. I just posted a link in the comments for the panelists, but for those who are watching or listening to this later, Google Bloody Disgusting and Pale Lady. Here's the title of this. The terrifying Pale Lady stalks this new image from Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. I wasn't too excited about Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. I thought, okay, that's it. It's gonna be a kids show. And then I see this picture, and I'm like, Holy fuck.
It's gonna be straight up nightmare fuel, man.
Yeah, I mean, look at that picture. That is as scary as hell.
Did you read them? Are y'all? This was like
Yeah,
my absolute nightmares when I was growing up. This was the stuff that went into my brain when I was like 8, 9 years old that like kept me up. The girl's face exploding with spiders and the pale lady and the oh man. Ugh.
Yeah, they.
Yeah, speaking of satanic panic, I mean, there's like one where he straight up just superimposed a skull and like put like hair on it, and it's this story. Oh man, I have a copy of that still, and I'll flick it open every now and then just to be like, no, it was that messed up.
Yeah, it's totally the artwork, especially, is just like really demented. And if you wanted somebody to do that, Guillermo's the man. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Guillermo del Toro, and he wrote or he told this bloody disgusting site. Stephen Gamble draws these very ephemeral images, and we tried to translate them into 3D. I actually recruited the best sculptors I know, who are Mike Hill and Norman Cabrera, and I went to the best physical effects makeup companies, Spectral Motion, and there we went and honored the Gamble drawings. We did several of the characters in the book. In each instance, we would say, does it look and feel like the character on the page? And he said they come across as close as you can get to a Gamble drawing coming alive. And this all comes out on August 9th. So
Yeah,
I don't know. I got to see these.
I'm like popping up images of this thing, and it's already like bringing it back.
Yeah,
I
that
mean,
pale lady, man. Ooh.
I would get up as a child to go to the bathroom at night and be scared of the pale lady coming after me. Like, this is the. Whew.
But then we want your reaction the day after you watch it.
I'll be here with it for sure.
Well, it's like that combo of like Shinji Ito and like just real enough to like start to make you're in the uncanny valley, but like also disturbing. Ugh.
Yeah. All right. I'm putting this out there. I'm interested in highway horror, but what I mean by that is, the concept of driving the lonely highways of America at night, and
like Saphira.
yes, exactly.
Well, hey,
Excellent. Well done, Kirk.
Yes.
Caravans arrive.
Joe Pulver's story, I think There Will Be Blood, right?
There Will Be Blood. Yeah.
It was brilliant.
There was a whole anthology, Caravans Arrive.
What I don't want is serial killers, stalkers, that type of thing. I want supernatural horror. So if anyone has any suggestions, Saphira, for example.
Laird Barron has a story, Frontier Death Song, which is kind of a loosely autobiographical story about the writer who's coming east and he's being chased by the Wild Hunt. And the Wild Hunt is being led by Stephen Graham Jones. And I kid you not, and he has to flee to Jeff Ford's house for help from Jeff Ford. Of course, he'll deny that these are who these people are, but read the story and you'll be like, oh yeah, that is Stephen Graham Jones. He's so handsome. And he'd be like, oh, that's Jeff Ford. He's so reassuring.
That is true about both of those guys.
Yeah, exactly. Stephen Graham Jones, he's the handsomest man in horror fiction.
Yeah. You shake Stephen Graham Jones' hand, and then I'm like,
yeah,
I might, yeah. Never going to happen. This is as good as it's going to get. But no, I'm interested in that. If anyone out there thinks of a collection like that or a story like that or a novel, whatever, email me, lovecrafteasing@gmail.com.
You have to include
have you seen the
Twilight Zone episode we talked about the other day?
What?
About that woman who is followed by that hitchhiker across the country.
Oh yeah, that's a great one. Yeah. And the Twilight Zone. John, I told these guys this 2 weeks ago, but did you know that the Twilight Zone, the hitchhiker story was originally taken from, it was written as an audio drama in 1943.
No, I did not.
Yeah. It was an audio drama. Old time radio show. So
Interesting. The funny thing is, I thought like It Follows is a kind of you're being pursued, right, by something, and I always thought you could write an interesting story about somebody on an airplane who's just flying back and forth every few months from coast to coast to just try to keep this thing on the move.
Yeah.
You know,
That's not a bad
And you
idea.
can't jump a airplane like you can a freight train. I'll tell you that.
well, it's difficult.
Mike, have you ever seen a film called Road Games?
Road games? No, I don't think so.
Stacy Keach and Jamie Lee Curtis in Australia. It's an homage to Rear Window. Not
Oh, really?
natural, but it's really good.
Okay, I'll
Really
check that out. But yeah, I'm interested in that. Actually, Saphira was one of the reasons why I wanted to ask, and then I've got another collection right now that I can't think of the name of it, but it was, some of it was good, some of it just left me wanting more. So I thought I'd ask the audience. So, I think that's it. Anybody got anything else?
Yeah, I do.
All right.
So it's been floating around there for a couple days. I didn't think Ross liked it, but I got an advanced copy of a Word Horde book that's coming out it's by Brian Hauser. It's called Memento Mori.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Yeah.
The Fathomless Shadow. Man.
Fathomless Shadow. Great title.
Shadows. Yeah, Shadows. Really good. If you like lost film stories and Riot Girl, yeah, it's really good.
Can you give us kind of a spoiler-free synopsis?
I can't.
Okay.
It starts out being about this guy who's researching old zines and self-published stuff, and then he finds, particularly about horror films, and he finds the solution to one girl's disappearance.
Okay, you've already got me.
Yeah, it leads down a rabbit hole of yellow coloring.
What is the title again?
Memento Mori, and I don't think it's out yet.
No, you can't pre-order it either. I just tried.
Yeah.
Does it have a date on it, Matt?
No, there's nothing even on Amazon yet.
Who's publishing this?
Word Horde.
Word Horde. Okay. Yeah. Well, that sounds really interesting.
Yeah, it's there's this whole idea that, there's this phrase that the medium is the message.
Mm-hmm.
But the question happens: what happens when the medium starts to change? And that's a key factor to the story.
Well, next week we have Prepare Yourself. Cody Goodfellow will be on the show. So
I'm gonna need more beer.
I think we just need to be prepared to ask him one question at the beginning and maybe one question in the middle, and he'll take care of the rest.
Yes.
So I'm kidding, Cody. I love Cody. I think he told me he's got a book coming out, so that's why he wanted to be on.
Yeah. Well, I like his. I was sitting in a bar eating lunch, and I looked up, and there he was on television. What the? Did I just see Cody Goodfellow? Yes, I did. Son of a bitch.
Oh, one last thing, guys, before we go. Have you seen this Amazon Prime, a trailer for this Amazon Prime series that's going to be out in July called The Boys? It's about these superheroes who are basically power mad.
Dude, is that the face sitting the lady?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's another thing for Seth Rogen to screw up real bad after he destroyed Preacher is what it is. That's what The Boys is going to be. Hooray.
You didn't like Preacher?
Yeah, the comics are incredible. And then Seth Rogen laid a big old goose egg fart out for everybody. And
So
we get all that.
So I'm
Let me
getting
know how
that
you
you didn't
really
like it.
feel.
Little wienery Jesse. Anyway,
So you didn't like it? Is that what you're saying?
not a fan.
Well, anyway, I've got high hopes for this because it just looks so damn cool, you know. And Carl Urban's in it, and he's basically saying, "Fuck these superheroes, we're gonna take them out," something like that. That's what I got from it. So,
That dude got robbed with the Judge Dredd. He should have gotten a franchise out of that. That was a good movie.
yeah, I really like him. You know, he's real versatile. I mean, he was the bad guy in that Matt Damon spy movie. Sorry, it's um,
Jason Bourne.
Jason Bourne. Thank you. Wasn't it Jason Bourne 2, the second movie?
It's all just one big blur.
Yeah,
they're all. They're all pretty-
they are.
I was
blurry.
doing a lot of cocaine back then.
Carl Urban was also Dr. McCoy in the last Star Trek movies.
Yeah, and he does that so great. And then you watch the trailer for The Boys, and he's got some other accent going on. I don't know what it is, but yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So, again, John, thank you for being on the show.
Again, thanks for having me, guys.
Really great to see you. And guys, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Everybody listening and watching, thank you. I appreciate it. And a special thanks to my patrons who literally without you, I couldn't keep doing this. So thank you very much. And next week we got Cody Goodfellow. The week after that, Amy Sturgis. And the week after that, we've got somebody from the Mysterious Package Company. I don't know if you guys are familiar with them, but that's pretty awesome stuff. So anyway, thanks everybody, and we will see you next week.